Nhan joined our team, became a majority owner in Seller Labs, reinfused us with cash. We're excited about everything he's done with us. And he brought back something that Seller Labs had at the very beginning, which is a seller founder. So Brandon Checketts, who's on the call, obviously. Brandon, tell us a little bit, just briefly, when you got started with all of this, what were you selling? Like, why did you automate some of those processes?
It's ancient history by today's standards, but back in 2013 or something, I had a book website where and then I transformed that to buying and selling books and media online. So we were buying bunches of used books from the U.S. Postal Service auction and DVDs and CDs and that kind of thing, and reselling those on Amazon, obviously.
So, I mean, lots of orders coming through there. And that's where the first idea, I mean, you tested out a couple of different ideas you've told me before. Which one was the first one that took off for products that you built?
I mean, the first thing we did was when you're selling media products, you're competing against other sellers on the same item. So you're competing for the buy box. And so you try to have the best ratings you can have for as far as like your seller rating and your shipping time and all that kind of stuff. So we were trying to increase our sellers' feedback score. And we were selling products like we called it loose mixed media, which was DVDs and CDs that had just the disc without any of the artwork or case or anything. And so if people were expecting those things, we got negative feedback on them. So the reason we wrote Feedback Genius to initially talk about, or to basically to email customers who'd placed an order and just remind them that what they had just bought was just the disc. And if they wanted the artwork and stuff, they cancel the order and go buy it from somewhere else. So, and that reduced the negative feedback that we got substantially. So we went from like, this 95% positive feedback score to being up in the 98% feedback score, which made a difference for buy box and everything else then. And they allowed us to sell more.
Beautiful. And I mean, that was exciting. Brandon, over time, you discovered that your real forte in business was focusing on software. And so you eventually shifted away from selling as much and continued to be the Amazon expert you are, mentioning, hey, you should probably have some sort of like, I don't know, MWS auth token on this thing, and that kind of influenced the Amazon team. That's such a great story. Actually, go into that for just a second. Tell us about the MWS auth token.
Well, back when we started developing on MWS, there was it was still MWS. Obviously, we replaced that with the Selling Partner API recently. But before the auth token was a thing, they used to just ask for your two public credentials, like your merchant ID and your marketplace ID, which are both public things. Anybody can find any other person's merchant ID and marketplace ID. And that was the only authentication that was needed to sign up and connect to an account. So it was extremely insecure. Well, there was a little bit more to it than that, but I'd emailed the lady in charge at the time at MWS and pointed out the security flaw. And, a few months later, they had introduced this MWS auth token, which was a third piece of credential, which was private, which made it impossible for somebody to authenticate somebody else's account.
Love it. So, and I think my favorite moment in my time at Seller Labs over the past, 18 months has been sitting in a call with a bunch of Amazon developers. And we mentioned that. And the API developer that was on the call, his eyes got like as big as walnuts when we told that story. And then he was like, I think maybe you should teach me about the Amazon API. It was so, it was just awesome to see that. So obviously the API expertise are here and here to stay. And as we gradually drifted towards being more of a software focused company, we didn't have as many sellers that were on the executive team. Is that kind of how that laid out, Brandon?
Yeah, it got to be so. I mean, we had a warehouse where we were doing the books, and we had 16,000 square foot warehouse and our own order management system and stuff. And it got to be where the warehouse was a distraction from the software. We'd have people come in from the warehouse floor like saying, "I can't find this thing. Can you find it in our inventory?" And I was like, "Okay." I had to stop what we were working on software development wise and then go fix some investigate some problem, and that so it got to be a distraction, and we eventually moved out from the warehouse to a dedicated office space, so we didn't have that. And then eventually ended up selling off that book business as well.
Yeah. And as we shifted towards that, I think that's part of our history with Seller Labs is we didn't have somebody who was right in the middle of all of that. And so Brandon and I, we talked about this a lot. Like, we need to bring in more sellers. And so the first step there, Brandon brought in his brother, Jordan Checketts, who's a seller on the executive team, and helped begin the transformation process to help us focus back on sellers. And then, when Nhan expressed some interest in joining us, we got really excited. So Nhan, tell us a little bit about why you decided you wanted to do software alongside your 7-figure Amazon business.
Well, the software side is also partly because of my background. I graduated as a computer engineering degree from Georgia Tech way back then, put that away and opened a lawnmower repair shop in 2005. And it wasn't until I started selling on Amazon did I pull that degree out again. And basically, we spent a whole year trying to find a software that just says, okay, here's my price, here's all the Amazon fees. Am I making any money? Is it profitable or not profitable? If it's not profitable, then adjust my price. And I spent a year and I couldn't find it. So I was like, all right, screw it. We're just going to develop it. So I went and hired people from India, try that, didn't work. Went to Philippines, that didn't work. Went to Costa Rica, that worked okay. And then finally, we brought people from the US to develop our own inventory management system. So I like basically the Amazon business that I ran was very intertwined with the business with the software side of it because without software we couldn't get the advantage and we couldn't run the operations. So that's
and
how I got to the software side.
and it's totally amazing. I mean, Nan, you did that seven-figure business is a wholesale business, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
Like that's to do that sort of volume in the wholesale space. And Nan has shown me some of his software, and it's pretty fascinating to see some of the different pieces of that. And that's actually part of where our discussion began. You know, Nan was a Cellular Labs user, and he liked what we were doing. He could see where we were going, and we were talking about, you know, developing apps together. And then we brought up this idea of, well, I mean, we're interested in bringing on additional partners and owners. You know, does that sound interesting to you? And you know, what did that look like when we brought that up? What did you think, Non?
I was about to pee in my pants. I was just kidding. I was like, I did not expect this. I was like thinking about through because I'm an intellectual person, right? I like to think things through. So I thought through that. I actually wanted to launch my own SaaS company. That was like it's been a dream of mine for years, but I didn't even know how to get started. I know how to develop product, but as far as the marketing and the connections, so I've been thinking about that for the last couple of years. And then when you guys made that offer, I was like, okay, here's an opportunity for me to come in and short circuit that process and you already have an audience and you already known and Cellular Labs has been known in the Amazon space for years already. So that capital, that brand capital was really enticing for me to come in and build on top of that.
Love that.
Yeah, I think
And
it also figured out a lot of the multi-tenant things, right? It's one thing to build a software for your own
Exactly.
organization, but it's a very different. It doesn't seem like it's that much different, but it's quite a lot different to build it for something that enables many people to use the same software.
Yeah, those are scaling challenges I knew that we didn't have the experience with, and we would have to wrestle for years with it to solve those problems.
Non, or Brandon, what was your first impression as Non began to kind of have the discussion? What made you excited about the idea of Non joining us?
Well, I think we'd known each other briefly, like friendly for 5 years or something like that, right? I remember, I
Yeah,
think he came to one of our events that we held in Athens, and he's
I won
we're
a couple of events.
geographically we're pretty we're an hour away or something, so we'd seen each other a few times and met before. So yeah, I think when he explained the understanding that he and his team already had about the Amazon API, like number one, it was like nice to have somebody else to like talk about that with because we'd had a few
Commiserate with.
and they didn't get how bad Amazon was
Yeah.
as far as like their development environment and stuff. So it was nice to see somebody that understood that. So it was kind of an immediate match when sort of technologically we had the same wavelength, and then also from a philosophy, like just a business and trying to do good type of mentality too. I think we're on the same page there.
Yeah, agreed. I was kind of involved in all of that, and I actually rolled some of my involvement into equity as well. So I'm an owner in the company as well, minority owner. I'll be clear about that, but I am an owner in the new version of Cellular Labs as well, and I'm super excited about the values. I think that's one of the things that I love the most about working with both Non and Brandon is we're on that same page. We do have that do good mentality and transparency, and I mean we're out there to help people grow their businesses and do it in an upstanding way.
I agree with that. Like, we met well, we connected even further from through a mutual friend, Tyler Jeffcoat, and I check with him to make sure that you guys have the core values because that's for me the like to go into a partnership, the core value alignment is my number one priority. Everything else is solvable. If you can't solve the core value, then everything else is gonna fall apart sooner or later. And so that's why I wanted to make sure that, especially like humble, hungry, and smart, like Patrick Lance, his book, right? To make sure that we're on the same page and serving like the desire to serve the customers, putting the customers first.
So all of that, and Tyler, you mentioned him as well. He's also a minority owner, not on the podcast today. He advises us from afar. We talk to him often, and we honestly wanted him to be involved in that way as a small owner or a minority owner, so that he could help us consider where we're going next and add that extra expertise. He's, if you need anything e-commerce accounting wise, brilliant, just brilliant, man.
Yep.
So
really
great.
Smart guy.
So Nhan, as you got your hands dirty here, you took over product, you began to look at this and say, wait, there's an opportunity here to kind of play with this data. And you began to look at the idea of integrating no code into our tool. What did that look like?
Well, there's several steps before that. Basically, you guys have been building this infrastructure with multi-tenancy and infrastructure for basically each seller has their own database. And that I saw you solve a couple of problems, right? The Amazon API, you can't just ingest data and expect to be able to use it. There's a interpretation layer, there's a massaging layer, and you can't use that data directly until you put in a SQL database, at least for querying purposes. So you guys have solved that problem for the most part. And then you've also solved the problem of making it available for anybody else to sign up for their account and connect to the SQL database. I saw that as a great value. You guys call that data hub back then, or data warehouse and data hub back then. And I saw that as an opportunity that regardless of what happens on Amazon, who sells on Amazon, how big they are, you will always need that SQL layer between Amazon and the end seller because of the complexity of Amazon's data. So that I knew that product had to exist. And if that product had existed when I first developed software, we would not have to spend so much time and effort in developing our own infrastructure to get that data and understanding and massaging it. So in fact, like that's my plan, is to eventually get the data from Seller Labs and just use that, leverage that infrastructure instead of us continuing to maintain the infrastructure we have for the direct connection with Amazon's data. So that's the first layer, to make that available. Second layer was, okay, now that we make it available, let's present the data in a way that's easy for people to use. And that's a trial and error. And like, if you know anything about development, the front end, I call it moving pixels, is the most time intensive development part. Like building infrastructure in the back end is, and the business logic is maybe 20%. But the front end, how to display it, how to, like, you got to move pixels around, things like that. I saw that like taking up most of the time. And we've experimented with a lot of technologies to make that faster. We even use, Windows Form, and we have an app for that. Windows Silver, Microsoft Silverlight, and other low code, like quick, I just want to get this data into a table so people can see it. Going from data in the SQL to data on a table where people can use it, that was a painful process. And so that's why when I saw Retool, it was an opportunity for us to speed up that process and get that faster. That's why we lean into that.
And what is Retool?
And so the way I look at it is like a front end framework. It's a way of developing. Basically, you pull data from SQL database and then you display it in the front end. And they develop a lot of great code to create the framework to make that fast.
Instead of writing like JavaScript to make a button here, like that stuff's all solved, and you can
exactly. It's just a drag and drop. Here's a button, and then you can write code to make that button do whatever you want. But at least to make that button, you didn't have to spend several hours just to write the Java code for it.
And Brandon, as you saw Nhan focusing some of our product effort on integrating that way, what do you feel like this? Because I know from my past experience, looking from the outside in when I was at Data Automation, I know that Seller Labs was looking into a lot of different dashboarding technology to try to solve this issue of iteratively fast, insights and massaging a lot of that. How is this different and or better than what we were doing in the past at Seller Labs?
We'd actually experimented with a few things like that. We looked at Looker back before Google bought it. We looked at a couple other competitive. We used Looker. We actually paid for like the expensive Looker thing for a while and tried to build on it and didn't get it to work. I think part of that is because we didn't have the seller sort of mentality that Nhan brings with it as well, to like figure out, like, we had data, but we could show data on the screen, but it wasn't solving the problem or solving an actual thing that somebody needed. And so I think Nhan brings an interesting and very practical approach to that. Is like, what's the job to be done? How do we take the data to solve that job? And then Retool does a really good job of making it pretty simple for us to like connect those dots. Like, here's the problem, here's the data, and we put it together pretty quickly.
Yeah. Go in with me looking at this specifically around, some of the first things you've done. You really focused on product reviews. Can you tell us a little bit about what was that you were looking to do and solve, and why did you decide to channel some of our energy towards that? Because it wasn't really on the roadmap. It was, I kind of want this already, maybe? Tell us a little bit about that.
So the old software I developed for my company, my e-commerce company, we call it the Tracker. And it's on the dream list for a while that we want customer feedback, because the essence of e-commerce is you deliver a product for a customer and make them happy. Well, in that, the feedback loop is you need to know if you're developing a bad product, or why does the customer keep returning it? So I always dream of, and Amazon makes that available, right? Product reviews as well as customer return comments. I always dream of saying, okay, when I go into my app, my tracker, I want to be able to say, okay, what is the customer's latest saying? Because sometimes our manufacturers send the wrong products, even though they say it's the right product. Let's say like a Honda mower wheel, they sent a rear wheel to a front wheel. A rear wheel has gears and the front wheel doesn't have gears. And they sent the wrong products, and the customers give bad reviews. And we'd have to shut down the listings and recall that product. Well, I was like, it'll be awesome if we can just see the returns that, okay, wrong wheel, what gears. And we've had to manually go in and dig that information out. Whereas like we want to make that as easily available as possible. And just like so much of Amazon's trust is built around reviews, that I saw that, okay, this is a must, this, I would love to have it. And you guys back then already had the infrastructure to get the reviews already. So it's just a matter of displaying it on the front end in an easy way to solving that was like a test of Retool, what we can do. And like, I'm hoping to merge the two products together, like what we've developed in the past 10 years with my e-commerce company, AA Power Equipment, and then Cellular Labs, like build into that.
Some of that's already happening. We're like the view that we've had those product reviews in our database for a long time, and we've never had a real view of them like that. So, I mean, we're getting back to our roots of a seller who's selling every day, who has a seven-figure company out there on Amazon in the trenches, just like the other sellers that are out there, and bringing back to those roots. So, back to that question for Brandon, and any commentary you want to make on what we've talked about thus far, Brandon, around the tables.
I think it's cool. Like, this has been obviously, so we had those reviews in our Seller Labs Pro app before, but it was like you had to use it inside of our app, and you had to use our pagination and our filters. And now with Retool, you can get all that, like you said, copy and paste it, download it, do whatever you want with it. And Nhan's taken it a step further and integrated it into his software. So anyway, that's one of the things that we realized, and kind of one of the things that kicked it off is when we went to this migration from the MWS API to the Selling Partner API. That was a lot of work that we had to go through. And we're like, man, there's value in just doing this work. Like, other people don't need to do this because we spent so much time and effort understanding the API, the changes, and making it all work. So we kind of went through all that work, and we keep all that stuff up so that if you're a developer like Nhan is, he's got a technical team doing that, like, you can integrate it without having to understand all the Amazon stuff. And then you can also use it in those sort of no-code tools like Retool and Google Sheets and everything else too.
Nhan's goal here, that I've seen him push on it, he wants to make it so that he can literally stop pulling data himself from Amazon. He wants to make the data inside there so trustworthy that he wants to go get at it. And right now, he's already beginning that process because he's gotten us to that point. So we're out, and see you guys next time.